Yes, Mr. Teal, it just arrived this morning, but I still don't know about the name. Chez Garbage has always been a trash anime restaurant, and... No, I understand that it tested better with focus groups. Slop has a very different implication that I don't think you're really... Oh, shit, I gotta go. I'll see you at the barbecue, though. BYOB, got it. Yes, I understand the B doesn't stand for beer. I've seen you eat a baby before, dude. You don't have to explain the joke every time. Ugh. Investors, am I right? But enough about business. You're here for trash. And let me tell you, buddy, this winter's pile might just be the largest and juiciest you've ever seen. Darn near enough of the stuff to swim in. So let's stop waiting around and thinking about that super normal conversation I was just having and dive right in, shall we? One of the most frequent requests we get at Chez Garbage is to put more good shonen battle stuff on the menu, which can be tricky since the FDA doesn't really let us serve good stuff, but I'm happy to report that for today's trash appetizer, we have Jujutsu Kaisen at home. Dead Account isn't just any half-baked spooky shonen trend chaser, though. It's a terminally online spooky shonen trend chaser. And when I say terminally online, I mean the internet is haunted. See, social media accounts can act as earthly attachments, anchoring and gradually corrupting their users' souls until they turn into vicious, uncaring monsters. But enough about reality. In this show's world, when someone dies, their Twitter account becomes an evil ghost that runs on batteries, and a bunch of teenagers have to hunt them down in the local department store or whatever and kill them again before they hurt someone. Dead Account actually has a better excuse than most shonen for why it has to be teenagers, too. Older spirit mediums have to run their psychic powers through an analog to digital converter at 1/10 efficiency just to damage these digitized demons, whereas the younger generation is inherently attuned to cyberkinesis, which manifests in various ways depending on what kind of mental illness they manifest online. A cyberstalker could gain the power to cling to things, for instance, while a gamer shut-in might use puppet magic, and someone who obsessively retouches all their photos could get healing powers that work through Photoshop. It's a world where holier-than-thou keyboard warriors wield almighty banhammers, while trolls wage their flame wars with literal flames. And those aren't just hypothetical examples. The professional YouTube troll is the show's Yuji, while the keyboard warrior Reddit mod guy I mentioned is its Megumi equivalent, and that might actually be more brutal slander than the actual JJK fandom ever threw at the real Megumi. To be clear, as characters go, they're nowhere near JJK's level, and neither are the fights they get into, but by bog standard shonen standards, it's fun and fresh enough. Certainly several cuts above the likes of, say, Togen Anki, so I'm happy to give it 3 baskets of garlic bread. Now, the built-in VPN and ad blocking features of today's sponsor, Opera GX, won't do much about ghosts, but they will protect you from all sorts of other online annoyances standing between you and your anime. Just by using my link to download the browser, you'll be able to instantly access region-locked streaming content from Europe, Asia, and America completely free, with no worries about plugin compatibility because the VPN and the ad blocker are built right into the browser. And with a VPN Pro subscription, you'll gain access to over 3,000 private servers in over 30 different countries with secure VPN encryption and data-saving options on up to 6 devices at once. Thanks to Opera GX's pop-out video feature, you don't even have to stop watching the anime that you're going through a VPN to watch, or your favorite YouTube anime talker abouter, as the case may be, while you're doom scrolling. And if you got a small screen where you can't see everything in the doom scroll over the video, you could just turn the video frame transparent. They think about these things. Plus, you can doom scroll in style with GX mods, which let you fully customize every aspect of your browser browsing experience, from the color palette, to the animated wallpaper, to the splash screen, to the sounds. Want Satoru Gojo meeting you in every tab? You can do that. Want to turn the entire internet into the Wired from Lane? You can do that too. Plus, mix and match mods, or even create your own from scratch. The possibilities are endless. Best of all, Opera GX is fully compatible with every Chrome extension you're already using, and their quick import feature makes upgrading your browser a snap. 4 clicks are all you need to level up your internet experience, plus, the one that you do in the doobly-doo to actually download, and then probably at least a couple more to get it installed and opened it, but nonetheless, very few clicks for a very good browser. Huge thanks to Opera GX for sponsoring this this menu at my restaurant. One of the most common uses for web browsers like that one these days is reading web novels, which, as any trash connoisseur can tell you, were popularized in Japan many years ago on the groundbreaking website Shosetsuka ni Naro. Today, they serve as the basis for some of the most delectably pungent anime adaptations in the entire medium. And now, thanks to the generosity of our venture capital partners, you can finally enjoy them all in one place. Yes, in the spirit of not understanding the themes and messages of Tolkien, I'm proud to introduce the official Palantir NarouSlop Trough. Don't mind the cameras, they're just there to collect data on your guzzling habits. Now, as you can see, this trough is divided into several buckets because NarouSlop comes in several different yet incredibly similar varieties to fulfill our various nerd needs. From left to right, we have Lonely Slop, Validation Slop, and most importantly, Number Slop. Lonely Slop, I think, is pretty self-explanatory. That's where you'll find your romance, bromance, anything that fills the void for an afternoon. Validation Slop, meanwhile, is for folks who do see other people on a fairly regular basis, but don't particularly care for it. Work/school sucks, everyone there sucks, but I personally don't suck, so give me a world where everyone pats my ass for not sucking, and/or all the people who do suck finally get what they deserve. And then, of course, Number Slop is stuff where numbers go up and your brain goes burr. Sometimes the numbers are letters, sometimes there's letters and numbers, but the important thing is it's a Skinner box you can watch. Be they isekai, villainessekai, one of those fucking things, or anything in between, all NarouSlop fits neatly into one of these 3 buckets with maybe a little bit of splashover. Okay, there's a lot of splashover. Obviously, you can find plenty of Validation Slop with stat screens and harems for days, or Lonely Slop where some assholes get what's coming to them in between the guy finally kissing the girl or whatever's going on there. But with a keenly honed taste for trash, our chefs are able to identify the dominant flavor in each of these anime and sort them accordingly. For example, there was a cute girl in the hero's party, so I tried confessing to her has an adventurer's guild, a loose skill system, semi-objective power rankings, a world generally saturated in number sloppiness. Plus, its isekai protag has a whole bunch of inept co-workers at the Demon King factory who treat him like shit and fail to recognize his overpowered greatness. However, those elements are self-evidently pretty half-baked, and from subtle clues in the title, we can deduce that the show's main focus is, in fact, on romantic comedy, which it also doesn't do very well, but that much is at least like 5/8 assed. The idea of a Demon King's edgelord lieutenant switching sides because he fell for the hero's healer is pretty entertaining. The execution, not so much. Kind of feels like they had all the artists working on backgrounds for most of the production time, and then a month before airing, they were like, wait, no one's animated any characters yet? And the writing isn't much better than that, but still, it is a pretty neat idea. I'll give them that, and that idea clearly belongs in the Lonely Slop bucket. Sometimes it's not so cut and dry, though. Roll Over and Die has stats for days. Protag Chan's entire life is ruined by not enough stats, and she turns it around by figuring out how to get way more stats. The stat screens themselves have like persona-level graphic design going on, and sometimes the show even does psychological horror with the stats.
なんでお姉さんの名前が?
Most straight up NarouSlop doesn't put anywhere near that much effort into its numbers. Yet, at the same time, most of those fucking things don't make the guy who betrays their Kirito, or I guess, Kiritet, even half this detestable. This guy doesn't just kick her out of the heroine's party for not having enough stats and also to make room so he can bang the heroine. He straight up sells her into slavery, and the slave merchant tries to murder her with zombies because her stats aren't even good enough for that. And in return, when she discovers that she can reverse the effects of cursed gear to get hella stats, she murders the shit out of that guy, and it's pretty clear that the other guy is gonna get the shit murdered out of him at some point in the future. All of which very strongly suggests not just validation slop, but straight up vindication slop. A story about a good girl and her girlfriend giving lots of bad men exactly what they deserve, which certainly many bad men do get over the course of the anime and just the half of the episodes that are out right now, and it's satisfying every time. As is every time she finds a new piece of cursed gear and the numbers go up. My brain goes burr a lot watching this show, but ultimately all of that is just meticulously painted eldritch dark fantasy icing on a deceptively fluffy Yuri cake. She may get a lot of numbers and stab a lot of bastards, but at the end of the day, what really brings meaning to Flum's life is her blossoming relationship with fellow escaped slave Milkit, her growing friendship with that nun in training who's caught the eye of a certain succubus, and the heroine's lingering feelings for her that are doing as much to tear their old party apart as not having the errand girl around anymore, which is probably for the best, all things considered, because it's pretty clear their whole war on the Demon Lord is really a genocidal power grab by the spiral from Uzumaki worshipping church that sent them to do the quest in the first place and is manufacturing abominations underground. And that, honestly, is some of the best lore I've seen in fantasy anime of any stripe, but even incredibly juicy and original lore tidbits like that remain secondary to the show's main purpose as lonely slop for lesbians and lesbian appreciators. So, turns out that even one of those f***ing things can be something other than validation slop. Most of them aren't, though. Jack of all trades, party of none is the rare one of those f***ing things that makes you think, wow, what a great succinct title, and it's pretty much all downhill from there. In fact, that might be the last thing you ever think about it, because even by the standards of this subgenre, it is such a generic non-object that it resists being perceived or even remembered. Even now, mere minutes after watching it to refresh myself for this roast, I find my brain slipping off its surface, scrambling for purchase on a single detail that doesn't also describe that other anime about a buff-focused mage who leaves the top-level party that didn't appreciate him enough to mentor a red-headed girl half his age who very transparently wants to bang him, and so do her friends. I can tell you that it doesn't have magic live streaming or carbon copies of Rudius Greyrat's entire harem or any of the other things that mildly set that other thing apart, but nothing that it actually does differently comes to mind. I guess it's pretty funny that the hero's party this particular Kirito is banished from wasn't actually given that title by anyone. They just kind of decided to call themselves the heroes and everyone else rolled with it. But the show doesn't really understand how funny that is. The world building's just super lazy generic video game shit, and I don't think the author thought about it at all. He didn't even put much effort into the video game shit. The entire reason Kirito gets banished in the first place is because his dual-classed swordsman enchanter build isn't min-maxed enough for the current dungeon meta, but his party is already the top record holder for the dungeon, so clearly their current comp is outperforming the meta. As a NarouSlop enthusiast, I'm frankly offended they thought they could sneak that by. into the bucket you go. Thankfully, we've also got slop like Hell Mode. The hardcore gamer dominates in another world with garbage balancing to wash the taste out of my mouth. I mean, low-key, that one's got a lot of lonely sloppiness going for it, too. Protag does end up getting isekai'd into the body of a medieval surf child because he begged the universe to give him a real challenge for once in his gaming life, and with nerfed XP gain and a crazy high learning curve on his starter class, it certainly is a challenge just climbing the level ladder, never mind the social one, but he gets something else in the bargain. A family that loves him, plus an endearingly psychotic childhood friend. And pretty quickly, his goal changes from get numbers or die trying to get enough numbers to elevate my family out of poverty and try not to die trying because that would make them really sad. It's clearly using the raw Skinner box appeal of NarouSlop to condition its gamer audience in a pro-social direction. However, the Skinner box is still the primary appeal in that scenario, and in fact, the whole social advancement narrative is really more numbers. See, there's a fixed amount of gold you have to pay to the government before you can go up in social class, which is already quite challenging to achieve with the absurdly high taxes that serfs have to pay. And by trying to pay for his entire family at once, Protag is also playing that game on Hell Mode, which is fantastic. And I haven't even touched on the actual core game system of the anime, which allows him to circumvent the inherently low numbers of his summoner class by summoning little critters that each give him bonus numbers and fusing those critters together to get even better bonuses, which he's kind of got to do because he can only store a very limited number of critters in his big book of numbers, and the number he can summon at once is further limited by his MP number. However, there's a summon that gives him more MP, and yeah, brr. Speaking of critters, one number that really needs to go up more is the pitifully low quantity of monster isekai anime. The concept of being reborn as something entirely inhuman and having to adapt to a totally new mode of existence is bursting with narrative potential and has spawned plenty of books as a result. Yet even if you include the sword one and the vending machine one, but not any of the skeleton ones, because let's be real, those are just regular dudes minus the skin, only 6 of them have ever been made into anime, and only 5 of those are remotely watchable. 4 if you're a Shane Dawson hater. 3 once you've read enough Chrysalis to fully appreciate the innate inferiority of 8-legged filth. But now, thanks to Reincarnated as a Dragon Hatchling, we finally got 7 of them, and that's not the only number you're gonna see go up here. We're talking HP, MP, EXP, skill levels, monster evolution ranks, all that good math. Admittedly, Protag is also kind of very lonely, but even when he picks a super scary evolution against his better judgment, just for the slim chance to get a little less lonely, all he actually gets from it is more numbers. At first. Eventually, it will give him access to a human disguise form, which does have me a little worried, if I'm being honest, because you know, once you let your Kiritomon digivolve back into a human, it's only a matter of time before he's doing boring human numbers like budgets and taxes. Still, so far, the numbers here are more than acceptable. Not quite Hell Mode level numbers, but this here bucket ain't about how good. It's about how much. That doesn't mean we're just gonna throw any old slop in there just because it cuts away to the occasional Excel spreadsheet, though. If the numbers don't mean anything and they're not properly distributed with Skinnerian randomization, my brain ain't gonna go burr. And that is precisely the problem with noble reincarnation, born blessed so I'll obtain ultimate power. Well, one of many problems. The whole show's kind of problems, and some of those problems are the best thing about it.
どうせ偽物のおもちゃだろ。え？
待て。 忠実なのはいいがやりすぎだ。
お見事です、13神の殿下。
あの男はいかがなさいますか。
But the math problems? Not so much. This show clearly wants to be number slop. I mean, it's got Protag looking at a stat screen literally 5 seconds after he's born. But it's just too darn loosey-goosey with the actual numbers, letters. I can accept getting an infinite level cap plus 1 S-ranked magic skill right from the jump. I mean, we got a 6-year-old with heterochromia swinging a sword as tall as he is on the poster. I can't say it didn't warn me. But you gotta make him work for it a little. In the second episode, this kid just straight up trips over 2 different legendary magic artifacts on an afternoon shopping trip with his brother. At least put him in a fucking dungeon or something. Come on! Of course, being a prince and all, the story is ostensibly more about statecraft than swordcraft, but spoilers, it also sucks ass at that. Pretty much every political problem the prince faces gets solved by throwing a bunch of money at it, and as soon as he whips out the wallet, there's almost always some asshole falling to the floor in front of him, proclaiming to the heavens what a genius he is for spending his dad's money so good. Unless you're a fucking Nepo baby, that doesn't even work as validation slop. It's just plain slop, and I'm dumping it on the floor where it belongs. Heck, even if you are a Nepo baby, there's better sloptions this season, like a Gentle Noble's Vacation recommendation, a rare double isekai about a nobleman who finds himself transported from one fantasy world to another and takes the opportunity to finally get in a long overdue holiday and befriend some of the locals, which is really what this show's all about at the end of the day. Pure, simple bromance. The chill dandy Liesel and his gruff new dungeon-delving buddy Jill are anything but glory hounds. They actually let other adventurers take the fame from them and just take some of the money off the top. And there's not much need for stat crunching when you can already one-shot most monsters with your magic floating gun. So this one's all about the vibes and the character chemistry, which are thankfully really good. A rare example of platonic lonely slop. Unless you don't want it to be, of course. Fanfics are always an option, and certainly the show seems open to them.
俺はてめえが金払ったそいつと同じ B ランクなんだぞ。あなた程度の存在と私のものを同列に並べられるのは。
But if that's what you're looking for, there are better places to find it. Isekai Office Worker, The Other World's books depend on the bean counter, is the most validation slop title paragraph I've seen on a web novel in ages. I mean, beleaguered accountant, underappreciated at the office, ends up in another world as a tag-along to the destined isekai heroine, then overhauls their medieval logistics and roots out embezzlements with the power of modern math and magic energy drinks, finally earning the recognition he deserves. It's not even subtext at that point, just straight up text, which oddly is kind of refreshing after watching so many of those fucking things beat around that particular bush, not to mention all the Karo Shisekai. And even if the goal isn't validation, surely with an accountant protagonist, we must be in for hella numbers here. Perhaps Paradox Interactive brain go burr? It definitely went a little burr in episode 1, but then at the end of the episode, Accountant-san collapses from too much magic energy drinks, and in the next episode, the handsome knight captain, who's kind of been eyeing him somewhat sinisterly, if you're not picking up on the vibes, helpfully demonstrates the proper procedures for magic detox.
口を開けろ。
Okay, let's not jump to conclusions here. There might be a perfectly reasonable lore explanation for that.
処置とは魔法を施した者の魔力を対象者に馴染ませることだが。
Sure. Skin-to-skin contact makes perfect sense. And yeah, obviously that other spell's only gonna work with him sitting on your lap. How else are you supposed to direct the mana flow around his body? So yeah, we got full-on BL Lonely Slop this season, and it is glorious. most of the time. Sometimes they really cheap out on animating the juicy bits compared to, say, the manga, but you know what they say, don't look a gift yaoi in the hands. Still, I do feel at least some of the complaints in that department are warranted, considering how many resources Studio Dean decided to throw at the villainess is adored by the prince of the neighbor kingdom instead, even though that is probably the laziest, most generic villainess story ever told, at least in anime. I mean, it doesn't even pretend like Protag-chan has to do anything to fix her reputation and avert the bad ending, despite only getting her memories back like a couple weeks before her fiancé betrays her. Literally everyone in the entire school and seemingly kingdom at large already thinks she's great, and that Prince Heart Knight's Lapis Lazuli Lackmouth, yes, that's his real name, is a moron for even thinking about dumping her. He doesn't even think it's a good idea.
よってティアラローズ、そなたを国外へ追放する。
追放
A few moments later.
I've made a huge mistake.
But it's far too late when he realizes, because of course with her being such a catch-and-all, the titular neighbor prince, Aquasteed Marine Forest, yes that's his real name, sweeps in to sweep Lady Tiara Rose Lapis Clementine off her feet literally the second she's unlocked down, revealing as they ride off into the sunset together that much like how she had a crush on him from looking at the posters for the game that was the sequel to her favorite game that she's trapped in now, but then she died before the sequel came out, but now she gets to date him, so she's pretty happy about that. He had a big crush on her because he saw her at school just kind of standing there doing nothing, and he had to go through several years of therapy to get over the fact that he could never have her, and every other woman in the entire world is obviously shit by comparison. Villainess anime actually has a lot of splash over between Validation Slop and Lonely Slop on account of so many Japanese women hate their husbands. And look, I do certainly understand the appeal of snacking on tea and crumpets while all the hottest and richest guys in the world fight over you, but at this point, there's like 50 different anime where ladies can get that plus an actual story, so I really don't understand why anyone would watch this one. I kind of understand why someone might have read it back in 2016 when it was one of the only web novels out there that was ripping off My Next Life as a Villainess, but that moment has long since passed, and yeah, there is nothing else in here that even remotely warrants this level of adaptation. Hell, there's better prince flirting action in Kunan the Sorcerer Can See.
お、凛々しい声ですね。それに触れるとわかりますよ。きっとお顔も凛々しいんだろうな。
And that's not even a yaoi. He's just doing it to get his fiance's brother off her back. Don't tell the brother it's not yaoi, though. He seems to be really into it. At least as of episode 3, which is as far as I am ever going into this show, because I fell asleep like 3 times already just trying to get through that. A shame, really, since I did have pretty high hopes for the concept of a kid who was born blind using magic to circumvent his disability, but alas, it's just more bog standard validation slop about a kid with OP magic being super OP all over the place while literally everyone sucks his for how OP and cool and handsome he is. Below bog standard, if we want to be completely honest. The pacing of this thing is absolutely atrocious, but Kunan himself is a delightful enough little scamp that his personality kind of makes up for it and makes it less than completely unwatchable. That and his maid is pretty funny, though nowhere near as funny as the maid in Easygoing Territory Defense by the Optimistic Lord, who also has much nicer titties, and the show is way better in every other respect too, but the titties are the really important point. Don't even get me started on Panamera Carrera Cayenne. Yes, that's her real name. I'm not sure if those are her real titties, but given the world's level of technology, I'm gonna say probably? Now, just looking at the first episode, you might think this show is pure validation slop, and certainly with its hero being a Japanese salaryman Karo Shisekai'd into the body of a child prodigy with the power to make literally anything he can imagine, it does scratch that itch pretty well, but it does something else a little bit better, and I'm not talking about Vaughn's growing harem, which even he doesn't seem all that interested in. I'm talking about the numbers. Now, if you've seen the show, you might be asking, what numbers? Despite the rigid magic system and all the magic affinity-related discrimination in the plot, there ain't a stat screen to be seen here. But if you're caught up on little details like that, you're thinking too small. Despite the many dungeons and dragons dotted throughout its world, this show doesn't want us to look at it like an RPG. It wants us to look at it like a city builder. And in city builders, the stats that matter are population, economic activity, resource stockpiles, currency. Just take a look at this bit.
こんなに大量のアーマードリザードを討伐したのですか。
アーマードリザードを商人に売った場合、1体金貨20枚くらいですかね。今回は肉が大半腐るでしょうから、肉は売れないのと輸送費を引かれて1体金貨8枚くらいかと。
金貨300枚以上いくじゃないか。
Yeah, them some good f***ing numbers right there. I mean, titties? Close call there, Geoff. They almost realized you're a real pervert. On that note, that is the last thing in the trough, so let's just move right along to the season's harem selection, which is one of the most generous we have ever had. And not just for the lads this time. Ladies, we've got not one, but two reverse harem type dealies for your enjoyment this season. And there's even more to enjoy in Dark Moon, the Blood Altar, than just the vampire hotties. A whole supernatural action side to the story that's honestly pretty well done, with solid animation and impeccable atmosphere. But of course, that's not why it's on the menu. It's here because this anime is like Twilight if Bella Swan had superhuman strength and Edward Cullen was an entire Korean boy band. Like a real one. The real-life K-pop idol group Enhypen lent their names and images to the original webtoon that they eventually based this anime on, and it's been spun off into like novels and a whole bunch of other stuff, kinda like the Backstreet Project, but successful.
Let's do it! Ready to rock and roll. Let's rock this Tin Man.
But if you think that's an insane throwback, you need to see Hanakimi, the long-awaited adaptation of the OG cross-dressing high school girl rom-com manga from way back in 1996, which paved the way for Ouran High School Host Club, Vampire Dormitory, and every other anime in that very specific subgenre, but those two are the really important ones, especially Vampire Dormitory. The story follows a precocious, some might say psychotic young woman named Mizuki, who in turn follows her favorite track and field star from America to Japan, where she changes her gender, forges her identity, and infiltrates his all-boys high school in order to be near him, and then, in a stunningly lucky twist, ends up being assigned to be his roommate. However, tragically, some past trauma has forced him to give up the high jump, so if she ever wants to see his beautiful leap again, she's gonna have to help him get his mojo back, all while hiding the secret of her gender from him for like all of 2 episodes before he figures it out on his own, because unlike most love interests in most of the anime that were inspired by Hanakimi, Sano's not a complete f***ing idiot. That's not to say there are no complete f***ing idiots in this anime though. Mizuki's new best friend Nakatsu is as dumb as they come, and through him we still get to enjoy the classic Shakespearean trope of a dude falling for a lady dressed as a dude and getting very confused about his own sexuality, which is always a delightful bit, though Hanakimi does run somewhat afoul of the whole Seinfeld isn't funny principle, where, you know, basically every iconic iconic gag that originated here has been done to death by its many imitators to the point that they don't really work anymore. Thankfully, the more subtle aspects of the character writing are still really good, and the show has a more organic, fast-paced flow to its story than most of the things that have ridden on its coattails over the years, though on the flip side, I do feel like it could give some of the emotional beats a little more time to breathe. Maybe that's a problem with the adaptation. I don't know, just feels a little rushed. Also, technically, it's more of a love triangle with a few boys waiting in the wings than a true reverse harem, but it still gives you more husbandos than you'll know what to do with, and that's the really important thing at the end of the day. So I'm giving it 3 frilly little trash cans full of Kleenex and ice cream tubs. Oh, right, and Dark Moon gets 2 frilly trash cans full of blood and razor blades. And hey, if you like your harem type things with certifiably insane stalker protagonists, you're in luck this season, because we've also been blessed with Mayonaka Hearttune and Arisu Yamabuki, the heir to a massive Japanese megacorporation who's chosen to slum it at a school for commoners in hopes of tracking down the retired ASMR micro-influencer he had a crush on in middle school. Not so he can confess his feelings to her or anything pedestrian like that. No, he's far above such petty mortal concerns, but rather so that he can bring the full weight of his unrivaled intelligence, handsomeness, clockwork regular bowel movements, perfect pitch, hard-working capabilities, just general adaptability to any situation, and other superior traits to all other human beings to bear in a quest to make her a famous voiceover artist. Because he promised that he'd do that when he was 12 years old, and Yamabuki never goes back on his word. Unfortunately for him, the streamer of his dreams is currently hiding out among 3 other hotties in the school's broadcast club, each of whom also wants to pursue some sort of voice-related career, be it acting, singing, news anchoring, or VTubing. However, for a superior being like Yamabuki, raising 4 anonymous high school girls to international superstardom is barely more of a trifle than doing it for 1, so the solution to his problem is as simple as making all of their dreams come true at the same time. Yeah, few harem protagonists are anywhere near this Chadley.
あれでも鍵かけたっけ
The only problem is, none of the girls in his ASMRM are anywhere near as interesting as he is. I'm much closer to falling in love with him than any of them, and not in the same way as, like, Rentaro Aijo, where clearly he's just the best lover that any human being of any gender or sexual persuasion could ever conceivably have. They're just that bland and tropey and forgettable, saved only by some admittedly great designs. I almost never find myself saying this about harem anime, especially not 100 Girlfriends, because Rentaro would literally kill me, but frankly, Yamabuki could do better. I give Mayonaka Hearttune 2 flaming dumpsters full of, Chad books with no girl books in there. Please ignore who the specific person I'm calling a Chad on the cover is supposed to be. You know, just imagine it's a generic Chad. Aaron spent all of his time working on the animation for the slop trough for this video, so we had to recycle some stuff. I'm sorry. But speaking of hanging a lampshade on what's ultimately just kind of lazy corner cutting, You Can't Be in a Rom-Com with Your Childhood Friend sets itself up as this grand, self-aware genre spoof about a dude who really loves harem manga and childhood friend rom-coms in general, and a childhood friend who keeps trying to seduce him by intentionally engineering lucky pervert accidents and other harem/rom-com tropes, all while he pretends that he doesn't have feelings for her because he's trying too hard to keep fiction and reality separate by acting like every other oblivious harem protagonist ever, which is kind of the issue here. All this show's attempts to subvert tropes amount to are ultimately the characters delivering genre-savvy color commentary as they play those tropes completely straight, which does still kind of work with Shio since she is, deliberately manufacturing these scenarios. That's a pretty good gag. And to an extent, it does make sense that Ayu's reaction to her doing that would be, there's no fucking way this is actually happening to me. Don't get ahead of yourself and ruin the friendship, dude. But then you throw the other girl, Akarine, into the mix, and she's literally just a tsundere. No subversion, no clever twist, just a character that walked straight out of a manga. She likes him so much it makes her angry, and so she does tsundere stuff all the time, which gets awful annoying, awful fast, though not quite as annoying as the way that all of the characters turn to the camera at the end of every joke to say,
やはり幼馴染とはラブコメにならない。やはり幼馴染とはラブコメにならない。やはり幼馴染とはラブコメになら。
I honestly think it would be less aggravating if their catchphrase was something like, wow, that happened. I give it one McDonald's dumpster. Wait, no, that's not subversive enough. I give it one WickDonald's dumpster. There we go. The show does have some nice jiggle physics, though. I will give it that. But if that's all you're looking for this season, you can do way better, because Chain Soldier is back for a second go with more surprisingly good fight scenes, more unsurprisingly good naughty scenes, and, of course, even more waifus than ever before. There has been a bit of a trade-off with the production changeover to Studio Passion, less expressive and dynamic action animation in exchange for way higher fidelity fan service. Leave it to the folks who gave us Nuki Tashi to get even more mileage out of the whole superpowers fueled by fetishes that Protag doesn't even realize he has gimmick. Chain Soldier Season 1 came the closest out of any anime in years to capturing the perfect balance of plot, action, and plot that made High School DxD so good in its early seasons, and despite the change in staff, Season 2 is more of the same. The fireworks may be a little less spectacular this time around, but it still deserves 5 golden dumpsters full of them, plus military uniforms that clearly violate all the sexiest regulations. It's not quite the spiciest thing on tonight's menu, though, because someone out there decided to ask, what if Chobits was even hornier, and somehow that got on television.
指を挿入していただければ正式にマスター認証することもできます。いやいや、それはちょっと。なるほど、マスターはバリネコでしたか。
Does it count if you lose your innocence to an android isn't technically hentai, but only because they skim through all the sex scenes like a one-pace editor rushing through the fights to get back to the plot. I mean, one certainly could, but you'd need Turbo Granny's powers to finish before the characters do. Or the pause button, I guess, but that's less funny. Still, I'm 3 sentences into this roast, and we're already running out of stuff that wouldn't have to be covered with puppies. To be fair, structurally, this is more of a comedy than anything else about this absolute fucking mess of a woman who tries to get a robot made, but accidentally orders a sex bot instead. But to be balanced, most of the punchlines are, well, you know. Still, it did make it to television, so it definitely belongs on our menu, and I'm giving it 2 big flamin' bins of marital aids stuck in toasters. After a meal that spicy, you're gonna want a sweet and mild treat to soothe your palate, and we've got just the thing lined up for dessert. An adorably wholesome piece of fantasy dad slop we couldn't fit in the NarouSlop Trough because it's actually based on a manga, an adventurer's daily grind at age 29, which tells the tale of a former slum rat turned successful small-town dungeon delver as his life is flipped on its head when he finds a precocious little wannabe adventurer trying her darndest to kill slimes on the first floor. Slimes that are honestly almost as adorable as she is. You gotta love them Cookie Monster eyes, but Rirui nonetheless steals the show with her adorable antics. The eagerness to learn, the confident mask over her fears and insecurity, the way she picks herself up whenever she fails and finds courage even when she's so scared that she pees herself on camera? What the f***?
おそらくサキュバスじゃないかと。
サキュバス？
私と同調したし、サキュバスで間違いないわ。
そっか。
Okay, yeah, that one goes right in the toxic waste bin. Wait, actually, Pete might really appreciate that one. Wrap it up, we'll bring it to the barbecue. Oh, right, you're still here. Look, Taro's kind of busy right now, so why don't you just go out, walk around Tokyo a bit, enjoy the cherry blossoms, and he'll come knock you out when it's time to go. Don't worry about getting lost. As long as you're near a Ring doorbell, we'll find you.